Hi everyone! New background. Welcome to my new home. Sorry if it's a little echoey in here. This is my first time filming a proper sit-down video with a mic. I'm in my bedroom, so yeah, if you follow me on my other channel, you know that I lived in like a one-room studio with my husband, like this one big room, and now we have small separate rooms, which is very exciting for us. The shelving situation, we're working on it. If you want to see moving vlogs, bookshelf setup stuff, that's all on my other channel. Enjoy. But today we are gathered here to do my monthly wrap up for April. It's April 30th today. I know that the lighting isn't like the best here. We're still moving in. We moved in 2 days ago, so things are just chaos. This is the only place that like looks semi-normal. So bear with me. We're gonna dive right in. I did a lot of reading mainly because I, first of all, had to distract myself so that I didn't pack too soon. I'm the kind of person that would pack a month in advance and then live out of my boxes for weeks. So I really focused on getting out of the house and reading in a cafe just so I wouldn't make a mess of my life. And also I flew back and forth to the US. So I had two 15-hour flights to read on. So we've got a lot to talk about. But first, my very first package that I received in this new apartment, I'm going to pass you on to a different version of me with an exciting announcement. Yes, it is I, just a little bit later. You can see one of my bookshelves. Fun fact. I would very much like to thank the sponsor of this video, Book of the Month, and I'm super excited to talk about it. Not only because one of the books that I enjoyed this month that I'm going to be talking about later was a March Book of the Month pick, but because I got two really good books this month. But Book of the Month, what is it? It is a subscription service where they have a team of readers that comb through all of the newest releases, whether it is from your favorite authors or from brand new debut authors. Across all different genres, they pick their favorites. You, as a subscriber, will be able to choose 1, 2, or more books per month for one low controlled price. They will always be hardcovers. For this month, you can use the code PETALS, like flowers, to get your first book for $5. A hardcover, $5, okay? What are my two picks? First one I got has a crazy cover, Spitting Gold. I don't need to say much. Literally, let me just read this top blurb. An irresistible gothic novel about sisterhood, seances, and sapphic love. It takes place in Paris in 1866. They believe that they're haunted by their dead great aunt who was brutally murdered during the French Revolution. Anyway, very excited about this one. Next up is one that I'm so glad I got my hands on because it is highly anticipated, I think, by many, many people. So this was not going to come to me at the library. 5 Broken Blades. This is a hefty one. It's heavy. 'Tis the season for treason. 5 of the most dangerous liars in the land have been mysteriously summoned to work together for a single objective: to kill the god king June. May the best liar win. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but yeah, it is a fantasy. Maybe they're all villains. I don't know. I'm just really excited. I've heard enough about it to be incredibly stoked. So 5 Broken Blades. Check out the other books on the list. Once again, thank you so much to Book of the Month. Code will be down below. PETALS, PETALS. PETALS. Thank you as always. Now to the list. Okay. Oh my god. Okay. We are once again entering a month in which I cannot believe I read this much. Like, the books in the beginning of the month feel like I read them ages ago. Let's dive in. So the first book that I read, I left you off with my March reading wrap up telling you that I was about 30% of the way through a book called Silver Under Nightfall, and I was convinced that I was going to love it. I wasn't loving it yet, but I was like, I feel it. It's coming. I'm gonna love this book. Silver Under Nightfall, to me, first of all, gorgeous cover is what really got me. And it was, all I knew about it was that it was vampire hunters and vampires, and that's about it. I think what I left you off with was that I felt like there was a ton of world building, and I thought that it was going to pay off. After the 30% mark, I was like, I feel it. It's gonna start now. Boy, did it take a turn. So I started reading this book because the second book was coming out. It already came out in April. So I was preparing myself. I was going to read the first one so that I could read the second one. I'm not continuing it. Just because it was not my book. It was not a book for me. This was just a very unexpected book because we're following a society that has vampire hunters and vampires, and our main vampire hunter and the vampires need to work together to solve a kind of mystery that's occurring. So I was like, this is great. After the world building, because it was really heavy world building, after this, I'm gonna be totally on board. The second the vampires like get together, I started to feel, I was like, oh no. Oh no. It turns into very much more of like a romance than anything. There are like multiple chapters dedicated to, it's polyamorous. There's multiple chapters dedicated to the vampires teaching our vampire hunter how to have like more stamina so that they can have sex a lot. I was just like, what am I like, why? I was here for like vampires solving mysteries when they're like, we gotta go fast, we gotta solve this mystery, people are dying, things are gonna get worse. And then they take a 2-week break to teach our main character like how to get his stamina up. Oh, like I was just so confused. And so I thought world building was gonna pay off later. It didn't. The action was very just like confusing. I didn't feel a connection. It was very much immediately a kind of physical rather than emotional relationship. And then I said it just felt kind of lusty and based on desire. I would have liked more emotional work if it was going to be more romance focused. So yeah, I still stand by that. I think that they put in so much work to building this world and then they just kind of threw that out to focus on this romance that I don't think they put the work, like so overall I really didn't enjoy it. I felt very let down. I think maybe if I knew that ahead of time that, oh, this is more focused on the romance. And to be fair, like at the end it did get action-y, but I was so distracted by like the huge chunk of time that we suddenly spent on the romance that I just lost interest in the end. And then I kind of like forgot the characters. Like there were so many character names and I was like, who are these people? Because we've only been focused on these three for such a long time. Yeah, it just was a letdown, unfortunately. But again, that's simply because it's not my style of book. If you are interested in that, give it a try. A lot of people in my comments said that they really liked it, hence why I read it. So, Silver Under Nightfall. After this, honestly, this was a gift from a friend and I read it because I knew that this wasn't the book for me, but I knew a friend of mine who would really love it, so I read it really quickly in order to pass it along. This is The Butcher and the Blackbird. This is very popular, I think, on Book Talk. It is a dark romantic comedy, I would say, like darkly funny. There were points that I thought were funny, but there were a lot of points where I felt like, oh, she wrote this to be funny. This is about serial killers that kill serial killers. These two killers meet up every once in a while to like kill people together. I don't know. Honestly, it was a smut fest and I thought that there were like, because they only meet up every so often, there are a ton of time jumps and I felt like those were kind of confusing me. And I skimmed the last 100 pages like so hard because it was just smut city, and honestly I was really just reading it to pass it along to a friend who is much more, that's her alley. It was something that I read. I feel like I can't really give you an actual review of it because it I mean, not my cup of tea. Not my cup of tea. After that though, here we go. Getting into books that I love. I read Untethered Sky. A lot of people recommended this when I was talking about shorter books that I felt really rocked my world. Six Deaths of the Saint. This is a 150-page novella by the author of Jade City. It's a fantasy that involves giant birds. It felt very like a dragon story, but instead of dragons, they were these massive like hawk looking things or like falcons. I kind of pictured them more as griffins, but they seem to be more like falcon-esque birds, and it's about a particular girl who trains her bird, and once her bird is trained, together the human and bird duo go around the kingdom and help kill these monsters that roam around. And we follow her through a short time where she like raises her bird and all of this stuff. Oh my god, that ending, the ending was really good. There is a very subtle romance that I felt like, because it was so subtle, it made my heart hurt even more, strangely. I just really liked it. I think that it did the damn thing in 150 pages. If you were looking for something short, that again, I feel like if you're a dragon girl, this also kind of falls under that. It kind of was able to end in a way that I feel like other fantasies tend not to. So it was quite refreshing. It felt like a very new take on a kind of trope of, you know, human raises this mythical being and they work together. Very different. Really enjoyed it. Untethered Sky. Next up is a DNF. Unfortunately, this is the Jasmine Throne, and I know it has like a cult following, and I understand, but it was sort of a mix of, I was getting ready to go on a trip, we were signing our contract in order to move. It was just a lot of moving parts, so I feel like part of it was that just mentally was not in the state to concentrate, but also I felt like I just did not connect with the characters enough to continue. It had a lot of POVs. That's my issue. So we basically follow two main characters. One is a princess who has been kind of banished and is being punished because she refused to take part in a human sacrifice. She didn't want to be burned alive. Shame on her. So she's getting punished by her brother, the prince. And then we follow another girl who is in hiding. What's her deal? She ends up working as kind of the handmaiden in the princess's prison. And there's a whole backstory in terms of like magic and magic practitioners and like cults and all of this stuff. I thought the world was interesting. It just got confusing because of the sheer amount of POVs we had. I think if the author had stuck to just our two main characters having POVs, it would have been great. But we got POVs of like a random politician at one point. There's this other one that I know is going to make sense later in the book, but like a character that we don't really know who he is, stuff like that. It was just a lot, and again, I just didn't immediately feel connected to either of the main characters, especially the princess. She was just kind of like around. I read to about 40% and I felt like we didn't know anything about her other than she didn't want to be burned alive. I don't know. I think this is one that was a combination of like the beginning wasn't enough to hook me and I wasn't in the right state to commit to a book that didn't hook me immediately. So I wouldn't completely write it off. I thought that the imagery was really cool. A lot of it takes place in this like temple where they have to climb this really precarious outdoor bridge thing. Like I'm picturing them walking up on this very high roof and stuff like that. I just couldn't dive into it. I couldn't sink into it. So I still recommend you at least look it up, read other reviews, give it a try. But for me, not this month. The Jasmine Throne. I'm stuck on the dragons. Next up, this is where we enter my reading on the airplane era, which you know I love a rom-com. So I read the arc of Not in Love, the newest Ali Hazelwood. I will put its publication date wherever it needs to go. This one was different than other Ali Hazelwoods in a way that made me not like it simply because of my taste. I think that it still had the kind of flavor of every Ali Hazelwood book. I think it was funny, but it was almost like she Ali Hazelwooded too hard. Like it felt especially like Love on the Brain, or what was her newest one? Love Theoretically. It felt like that, but just like in a different font and not quite as good in my opinion. And we basically follow a scientist, researcher who is working for this startup that is being taken over by a VC, basically, like another company swoops in and buys a huge portion of the company in order to support them and like continue their work, but really they know that sooner or later that company is going to push out the CEO and try to steal the work that they have done, right? Steal it in name only. Our main character is not interested in romance, so she loves to go on dating apps and is like, one time only, I'll meet you at a bar, we're gonna hook up, I'm never gonna see you again. Are you down? And so that's basically all of her relationships are very clear, hard line, one night stands, don't ever see me again. And wouldn't you know it, one of those people who she matches with on a dating site walks into her office to take over her company. So that kind of setup, very Allie Hazelwood. The thing that was different is that we know from page 1 that they are very physically attracted to each other. So there was a lot less tension. Like the thing that I love about Allie Hazelwood are all of her male characters are simps, and there's a lot of like longing glances and like all of this stuff. This was very much more like, we both know that we want to bang each other. It's just a question of when. So the yearning was a little bit less emotional and again, a lot more physical. It was physical first and then it turned emotional. I tend to like the other way around. So this one I just didn't click with, but it passed the time. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. I'm not in love with not in love. Let's just say that. Ooh, next up, I read Catalina. This is another arc. Again, I will put the publication date above. This was really good. We follow a girl who was born in Ecuador, and when she was about 5 years old, she moved to New York City to live with her grandparents after her parents passed away. And so she's living in America, growing up there, but she is technically undocumented, and we follow her life as an undocumented American. She goes to Harvard, and it's really just, it's not very plot heavy. It's more of just this picture of her life, and her parents are her grandparents are also undocumented, so just like what it means to live in such a precarious situation. I thought it did a really good job of calling out a lot of white folks for, like, for example, I think there's a professor or something who is like the Latin American studies professor, who's like this white woman who's like, oh my god, I love Ecuador. Like, she's surrounded by people who are interested in her culture but not interested in her people, and I thought that the book did a really good job of showing that in a really realistic way. It didn't kind of make caricatures of like your typical like racist white people. This was very like so dead on. I thought the narrator was really engaging. Yeah, I would definitely recommend. Also, that cover is to die for. So that is Catalina. So those were actually the only two that I read on the airplane. And then I was home. I was in Pennsylvania with my family. We went to see the eclipse. And so throughout that week, we were there for about 10 days. I slowly, in my kind of jet-lagged state, chipped away at The Foxwife. This was highly anticipated because I have read, is it The Night Tiger? I've read another work by this author and enjoyed it, so I knew I was going to be interested in The Foxwife. I will say I think that the way that I read it helped me not lose interest. I wonder if I had sat down and like fully read the book like kind of in one sitting like I tend to do, how I would feel about it. But because I had these just like little morsels throughout the week, I was into it. So The Foxwife is about a woman who is a fox. So there are these kind of mythical foxes that can turn into having like a human form, and our main character, her child was killed by a fox hunter, and she's on a mission to find that hunter. Her mission ends up getting wrapped up with a detective who is investigating a bunch of young deaths. We begin our story in Manchuria and we spend a lot of it in Japan. It was just really interesting, the kind of mythology that is tied throughout the story, because foxes can drain your chi, your life energy, and they're like immortal. It was just, I really enjoyed it. I'm not explaining it that well because honestly, like, the plot is coming back to me as I'm talking about it. I think I didn't know for sure where a lot of the action was going, but especially as we get towards the end and we start to realize the connections between the characters, I really enjoyed the ending. I felt like the action was a little bit slow and very drawn out, so for me, reading it in little pieces actually worked, and it's in a dual POV. But yeah, that was The Foxwife, not a letdown. Happy to have read it. Oh my, okay, I feel really bad about this one because I've had a couple people in my comments tell me that they loved this book and I didn't. This should be counted as a DNF because even though I read it, I skimmed this book so hard because I was so bored. This is A Natural History of Dragons. I've seen it before. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited. And because I was talking about how much I enjoyed Emily Wilde, this is often compared to it because it is kind of similar. It's basically written as a memoir of this very elderly woman writing about her life and career as a dragon scientist. I don't know what you would call her. But this is the first book and we kind of follow her as she's telling us about how she got interested in dragons and then her kind of first adventure studying in this field. I will say I got a comment being like, I can't believe this book had a forced marriage in it. This is taking place in like Victorian England feeling, even though they changed the names of the places. We're definitely in like Victorian England setting. She just married a man that was like in her social circle. Like that's how women got married back then. It wasn't a forced marriage. It was just, that's how the marriage market worked in Victorian England, you know? Like, so that aside, it takes place in a kind of Victorian England era. And she is either 18 or 19, I think. And we follow her on an adventure that takes place in like a kind of, I think it's supposed to be like Romania feeling. My issues with this book are, I thought the beginning was really interesting. However, she is at her most insufferable age. So because she's 19, because she's never seen the world, because she's brand new to this entire field of study, she is really ignorant about people outside of her world, basically. So she says a lot of weird shit when she gets to like this fake Romania-esque place. She has a lot of these like horrible prejudices. And even though the narrator, who's like the elderly woman looking back and telling the story, she openly says like, yeah, I'm really glad I didn't keep a diary because I would have said a lot of ugly shit, and I'm glad I didn't leave a record of like my horrible mindset as like a young naive person. But she still kind of wrote it, and so I was just like, I don't want to read about this kind of insufferable 19-year-old who is just annoying, and she ends up getting everybody in a ton of trouble because of her kind of naivety and stuff like that. I will say the ending threw me for a loop. She got me there. Or the author got me there. But overall, I was just so incredibly bored and did not enjoy the main character, who is like 99% of the story. So yeah, that one was a real big bummer for me. That one is a no, unfortunately. The Natural History of Dragons. Oh, okay, after that, I read, this is another arc. It should be coming out very soon. I don't know. The Night Ends with Fire. This is a Mulan retelling, but instead of it being Mulan goes and joins the army in order to save her father from having to fight when he is like elderly and injured, she joins the army in order to escape from an abusive and like opium addicted father. My notes are literally based on Mulan, so good, ate it up. Yeah, this was one that I just read really quickly. It ends in a way that it could be a standalone, but I really want it to continue. Like, it lets you imagine more, and I would really like her to write more. I will say I got a little bored in like the 60% mark because there's kind of a change of scenery that whole section was boring to me. But I thought everything else was really exciting, really just like a great pace. There was a lot of action, but we didn't linger too long and we didn't make the action too short. So it was just this kind of sweet spot for me because I don't like reading battle scenes necessarily, but I also want action to happen. So this was just perfect. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It's The Night Ends with Fire. I recommend. Then I got on my flight home and I read Fragile Animals. This is another arc and it's out already now. It came out April 25th. This was very surprising. So the marketing of this book, I think, is incorrect. The marketing is literally a woman with a traumatic past because she was raised Catholic, whatever, enters a sexual relationship with a vampire. Not wrong, but not right either. So the sexual relationship with a vampire is like minuscule part of the plot. Don't even think about it. Don't read this book for that. We really just follow a woman who is from Scotland, was raised Catholic. Her mom was really devout, and with Catholicism, a lot of it, you are raised with a lot of guilt and like everything is a sin. She was raised just feeling always very like, any second now I'm going to be sent to hell. She just has a lot of complicated feelings about a lot of things. She is a writer. She's trying to write her second book of poetry. She decides, I need to go away to work on this book. Goes to this island with like population 5 people. There's a bed and breakfast where she stays. The only person staying at the bed and breakfast is this man named Moses, who is like gross, okay? He's like dirty, not handsome. Like, this isn't a sexy vampire story, okay? He looks like he just crawled out of his own grave. He wastes no time in telling her that he's a vampire, and they end up just kind of taking moody walks around the island and just talking about their lives. And so I actually found that Moses was the least interesting character in the book. I don't know why they're pushing the whole like sex with a vampire thing in the marketing, because those were not the vibes that I got. But I really enjoyed it as someone who was raised Catholic and is no longer, but still is so interested in the church. And like, I have family members that are so involved in the church. I thought it was very interesting how there were some parts of it that were so deeply poetic, and then there were other parts where she's talking about like, what did she say? There was a point where like they were having this conversation, taking a walk at night, talking to each other, and then a cloud goes over the moon, whereas the writing had been super poetic, like describing Scotland at night. All of a sudden the writing switches to like, oh yeah, the moon just covered herself because even she's sick of hearing about this shit. So it was just like a very interesting voice to the book that I really enjoyed, and that is Fragile Animals. I actually ordered myself a physical copy because I liked it that much and I love the cover. So after that, again, I was on an airplane, calls for a rom-com. The only one that I really had on my Kindle at the time was Mixed Signals, which is another book in the Love Light Farms world. I enjoyed Love Light Farms, whatever. The next one I didn't love as much. This one I also didn't love as much. So like, Love Light Farms is a Christmas tree farm, and we have the owner of the farm, we have the like main groundskeeper, I guess, and then we have a bakery that is also part of this farm. So now we are following the baker. This is meant to be kind of like fake dating, or at least they're dating in order to like give each other tips on why neither of them can like have a long-term relationship. So they're like grading each other on their dating skills, is kind of what the vibe is supposed to be. Did it hit that mark? No. It was fine. I really like the side characters. And this goes for all of the books in the Love Light Farms that I've read. The side characters are the best. Like the townspeople, they have like a phone tree where they spread gossip. Like, those are my favorite. And she writes them hilariously. So like, I had a good time. I just never seemed to like the couples, weirdly enough. I also think that in this one, the personalities changed a lot from how they were in the other books. So we follow the baker, and then we also follow Caleb, who is the police officer who ends up getting fired from the police force because he's too nice. Now he's a substitute teacher. In the other books, Caleb was like a really shy, awkward dude. And in this one, all of a sudden, he's like very suave. So it was just sort of like, but let me know your thoughts. I definitely, like I said, had fun just because the side characters are so good. But overall, just like as like standing on its own as a book, right? That was Mixed Signals. Ooh, after that, I have a physical. I read Anniebot. This was from Book of the Month last month? Yeah, last month. Anniebot. This is about a world in which there are now robots, and we follow one particular robot named Annie, who was hired by her owner, Doug, bought by her owner, Doug, I guess. Originally, she was purchased as like a housekeeping bot, but you can change them, and she was changed to being a cuddle bunny, which is basically like a sex bot. She was also triggered. You can have like a dumb robot that just like does basic commands, or you can have a robot that is basically like AI and can learn your preferences and things like that, blah, 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 have a personality, etc. So Annie has the ability to learn and grow. It's a very obvious metaphor to how real women are treated, just using robots, but so what? I didn't have an issue with it being a kind of obvious metaphor. But yeah, I did think it was really interesting. I think in the beginning, it's a lot of like sex scenes, and I thought like, is this just gonna be a book about sexually assaulting robots? But once we get past that little bump, I thought it was really good in talking about like what is love and respect, how much shit people can put up with, what do men want in a relationship sometimes, when they think that they want a real woman, but the second she starts to think for herself, then it's like, well, no, hold on. Yeah, I thought it was good for what it was. It did exactly what I thought it was going to do. It wasn't a super surprising book, but if you're looking for just like a short sci-fi, I thought it was good. Anniebot. Next up, oh my god, it's at the bottom of this pile. Whew. Then I read The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Got my hands on it the day it came out. I have a reading vlog if you want me to go more in depth. I give you my live reaction to it. This was not exactly what I expected, but that doesn't mean it was bad. For a Leigh Bardugo book, it wasn't what I wanted. What I really love about her books are the characters, the relationships between those characters, and the kind of atmosphere that she is able to create. So I think that she was able to create a really great atmosphere, but what was missing for me was the connection between the characters. So this takes place in kind of the Spanish Inquisition era in Madrid. We follow a woman who is a scullery maid. Anyway, she works at this household of these kind of lesser, semi-going bankrupt nobles, and when it's discovered that she does have magical powers or the ability to perform miracles, she gets roped into this very dangerous situation where she has to toe the line of, if she does miracles too well, people will think she's a witch, and if she does them like well enough, then she could be considered a saint, but at any point people's opinions can change. Really, she just wants to like lay low and explore the world and have a free, happy life, but it continues from there. I will say that when Leigh said that this was the most emotional work for her, like even compared to Six of Crows, I was really expecting something more. A lot of the actual romance in this is sort of off the page. We get like the bare minimum interactions between our two characters, and then a lot of their time together is actually off the page. So then once the romance fully kicks in, I was sort of like, I didn't know that they had such strong feelings for each other. Like, where did this kind of come from? So I think that it lacked a little bit of that strong characterization and just character connection that Leigh writes so well. If this hadn't been Leigh Bardugo, and I didn't go into it expecting that, I think it would have been a good book. Definitely less heavy on fantasy. I enjoyed the book, but it just wasn't the Leigh Bardugo treatment I thought I was gonna get. Does that make sense? But the more that I think about it, the more that I like it. Let me know your thoughts. I know that a lot of people are having mixed feelings about it. I think it was just a different, if it was just like this, it would have been rated higher, but I just kind of expected a little bit more. We're almost done. Next up is a DNF, and I got so many comments when I mentioned that this was on my TBR. I got so many comments of people being really excited for me to finish this book and review it, and I didn't finish it for a very specific reason. This is Butter, and honestly, it was good. It was a very good book. It was very interesting. We follow a woman who is in the process of like interviewing. She's a journalist, and she's interviewing or just kind of bonding with this woman who is being accused of being a serial killer, killing these rich guys that she dates. And she refuses to talk to journalists, but the only reason she's talking to this girl in particular is because this girl is using food in order to get close to this woman. So the woman is like a total foodie. She loves cooking. She just loves delicious experiences, let's just say. And so our journalist is really like, doesn't think too much about food. She's very much just like, let me hit the convenience store on the way home. Doesn't cook for herself ever. And so this woman is like teaching her how to cook. And because she's in jail, she can't go to these restaurants, so she will like tell the journalist where to go eat, and the journalist will have to come back and like give her a full report of what she ate and stuff like that. The only reason I stopped reading it is because there is so much talk about weight, kind of very specifically in Japan, the importance of like looking healthy and not being over 50 kilograms. Like there was just so much talk about weight gain, specifically talking about weight in numbers, talking about eating so much butter and fat and food and gaining weight and blah, 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 that it just like was kind of triggering for me. So it was just like, for me personally, kind of unfortunate that I know why it was in there. Like that's literally a theme in the book. I get it. It's important. But just for me personally, it's not something I can read about safely. That was kind of a bummer because I really did want to, I enjoyed it. It made me very hungry. That just like going in there, I know that some people it's difficult to read about that as well. So a bummer, but I'm interested. If you're comfortable reading that, go for it. Fully enjoyed what I did read. Just have snacks on hand. That is butter. Next up, I read The Tainted Cup. This was so buzzed about. It was touted as being like a fantasy Sherlock Holmes, and kind of, I think. I liked it. Let me just say that. But I'm also so fascinated by what fantasy books hit hard for like either high fantasy folk or specifically like men who read fantasy. I agree that this was a fun book, but it's just interesting like why this book and why not others that have like a similar vibe to them. But maybe, I don't know, this kind of felt like to me how I felt with The Will of Many, where it was like mainly it's just me being pissed off about The Will of Many. I think The Will of Many is so silly for how much people are obsessed with it. And how much hype it's getting. It's literally an MLM. We are talking about multi-level marketing. It is a pyramid scheme. It's a book about a pyramid scheme. Anyway, it just bothers me that people will go to town for that kind of content, but will not support other authors. Anyway, so The Tainted Cup was fine. It got much better towards the end. We essentially follow the Watson, if we're going to compare it to Sherlock Holmes, the more Watson character, who is basically the assistant of this main detective. They work for the government. They're sent all around the kingdom to work on things. And when they are sent to investigate one murder, it exposes this much larger conspiracy, and my battery is dying. Okay, let's try that again. So, exposes a larger conspiracy, and we end up having to travel throughout the realm. Like I said, it was fine. I think that the kind of sense of humor and things like that, because the Sherlock Holmes-esque character is this very kooky woman who ends up becoming super funny. I loved every scene that she was in. And the thing that's interesting is this particular world is constructed into kind of rings, because the outer ring, it's sort of like an island, I guess. The outer ring, the closer you are to the ocean, the more dangerous your life is, because there are these leviathans, or like these giant sea creatures that will come out of the water, try to break down the wall, and will kill everything in its path. So there's also that like lingering in the background of like a constant fear that you're going to be eaten by a giant sea creature. But they're dealing with a particular magical death and conspiracy within the government. I felt like the sense of humor, especially between our two main like detective and detective assistant characters, was very on par with almost like a T. Kingfisher, or I would say like a Gideon, almost like a Tamsin Muir. But I think because of the hype, I was reading it constantly thinking like, what is it? What is the star power of this book? So I was a little bit distracted maybe reading it, trying to figure out like what was the draw, but it was good. I recommend you read it. I just have complicated feelings about the level of popularity that it has. Just why is it always the white men? Why is it always the white men? That's my question. But The Tainted Cup was great. This was a horrible review. I'm so sorry. There it is. Next up. Oh, I have talked about this on my book talk. This is The Whispering Dark. I got this book because I'm waiting for Your Blood, Your Bones, something. Anyway, the author has written their second book, and I was trying to put that on hold at the library, and I saw that their first book didn't have a wait, so I immediately borrowed it and read it, not knowing anything about it. Oh my god. So I compared this, and I still do, to The Raven Cycle, and I have to make this clear that it doesn't have the found family element. This is very specifically like if The Raven Cycle only had Blue and Gansey. So I understand that like the hype around The Raven Cycle is mainly because of how incredible the found family element and just like the dynamics between all of the characters is. But this one is very specifically Blue and Gansey coded. We're in the regular world, we're specifically in Boston. However, there is this new realm of study where we have found ways to jump between the veil and communicate with the spirits that have passed. And we follow our main girl who just got a scholarship to go to university in order to study this veil jumping. She is very excited to be going to university because this is her first time to really prove herself as someone who is capable of being strong and independent, because she had a kind of near-death experience when she was little, and as she was recovering, she ended up losing her hearing. So our main character is deaf. She has an implant though, so she can occasionally hear. The author is also deaf. So there were just like certain insights to being deaf that was really interesting to read, and it kind of added to our character. We meet this very mysterious boy who is the teacher's assistant who seems to know our main girl, but how could he? And we end up just getting wrapped up in this kind of scheme that involves ley lines and ghosts and hauntings and just like, yeah, I can't dive into it too much, but very Blue and Gansey coded. It's similar to The Raven Cycle in that the world building might not be super strong, like the actual rules of the veil jumping and the ley lines and stuff like that. You just have to kind of go with it, which I felt like I had to do with a lot of The Raven Cycle. So if you want like really solid world building and like stuff like that, I wouldn't go for The Whispering Dark. I personally really enjoyed it, and I actually, instead of waiting for like 14 weeks at the library, I purchased her next book. I trust her that much because of how much I like The Whispering Dark. So there you go. The Whispering Dark, highly recommend. After that, I read Bel Canto. Weirdest. This was not what I expected whatsoever. Also, I'm using my bookmark from Perry. Thank you. I did not expect this to be about people who are kidnapped and held hostage in South America with an opera singer. Like, this was just the most unexpected plot, but I actually enjoyed it. However, I didn't like the ending. So let me just explain this. We basically follow a Japanese businessman who, since he was a child, has loved opera. And very specifically, he loves this one singer. She's a soprano named Roxanne. And he's the head of this big tech company in Japan. So he is invited to this unnamed South American country because they kind of want to wine and dine him and convince him to open a factory for their electronics in this country to help with their economy. But he's not interested at all, but he's convinced to come to the meeting, which is disguised as his birthday party, because this country's government convinced Roxanne to come sing at the party. So he goes specifically just to hear and meet this opera singer, right? Turns out, because it's such a big deal for this country, they end up inviting all of these dignitaries, people from different embassies, the president and vice president are supposed to be there. Everyone's at this party. So when a bunch of these like guerrilla revolutionaries come in, take over the party, take everybody hostage, shit hits the fan, basically. However, the plan is messed up because the president, who is the only person they wanted to kidnap, is not at the party. He had other plans, which involved a couch and his favorite soap opera. This book is so ridiculous. So instead of just being like, oh, the president isn't here, bye, and like running back into the jungle where they were hiding, they just took over the whole party, and they end up holding these people hostage for months in this house. And because of that, they end up like all kind of becoming friends. It was a bizarre little book, but something about it, I really just enjoyed reading it. I will say I did not like the epilogue. If they had left off the epilogue, I would have been fine with this book, but I underlined so much of it. I thought that this was a really beautifully written book, but super bizarre and not what I expected at all. So I'm very glad that I read it. I wish I just didn't read the epilogue. It also didn't go into the politics at all. Like I was expecting, because this was about like they're trying to overthrow the government, I thought we'd learn a little bit about the politics of the region, but it was very much like the whole point of this book is that the world outside of this house stops existing for the amount of time that they are being held hostage. It becomes its own world, this house. So we really don't learn that much about the outside world and the circumstances that pushed these people to do what they've done. So yeah, just a very interesting book that I'm happy to have in my collection. Bel canto. Last two, really fast. As I mentioned in a previous video, I read The Coldest Girl in Coldtown. This is by Holly Black. I believe this came before The Cruel Prince. And this has nothing to do with fae. Can you believe a Holly Black book that doesn't involve fairies? This involves vampires. We are in America, where society has divided itself into the kind of normal society and then cold towns. So basically, this one vampire went on a rampage, changed a bunch of people, and in order to stop the vampire infection from spreading, governments just closed off certain parts of the city, and those are cold towns. So everyone inside of the walls are either vampires, humans that wanted to be there, or people who think that they got infected. So to become a vampire, you have to be bitten, but then you also have to feed on blood. So if you feel like you've maybe been bitten and you want to quarantine yourself so that you can pass the certain time period and not drink blood and then you're fine and you can leave, you have to report to a cold town. So it's basically just like this party, like 24-hour party, and they have like live streams all the time. So these vampires are like celebrities. It's like watching Real House or Real World, whatever. It's funny because thinking back, I didn't like the plot at all. I don't think the plot really made sense. The plot was just kind of dumb, to be honest, but I loved the atmosphere. I think that one thing that Holly Black does so well is she notices these tiny, tiny details that makes certain scenes and especially certain characters feel so real. So she wrote this in 2013, and the story opens with our girl waking up in a bathtub after having been at her friend's house for this like big house party. And the way that Holly Black describes her like walking through the house and looking at the trash and like all of the remnants of the party was so 2013 coded. Like even talking about the guy that she's dating, the way that he dresses, talking about his like checkerboard belt and all this stuff, I was just like, I saw it. It was so visual, just so spot on. So I really enjoyed just that, like her descriptions of things. I enjoyed the introduction of all of the characters and like the world building part of it. But then once we started to get into like the actual plot, I just didn't get it, and I didn't believe the romance, and it was just kind of like, what is going on? So I think this is a good book if you just need to kill time and you like reading about vampires, specifically like emo/scene kids and vampires. It was just really, I think I would have really liked it if I had read it in 2013, but as of now, I was like, what is actually going on though, Holly? So yeah, it wasn't, I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I think the first half was really strong, I will say. Coldest Girl in Coldtown. What a weird title for a book. And after that, my last book of April, I did finally manage to finish The Wager. This is nonfiction. I know, not usually my style. This is about a shipwreck that happened in, the 1700s. Basically, Britain sent a bunch of these warships to go around South America and attack the Spanish naval ships, specifically trying to find any of the ships that have treasure in them and bring them back to England, right? And it was just like unfortunate event after unfortunate event after unfortunate event. I just can't believe how much trauma the human body can take and like the things that people can survive. They end up, some of these crew members don't make it back to England for 5 years. Like they are stuck on an island and trying to make their way through the South American jungle for 5 years. Like crazy, crazy stuff. So it was just very interesting to read. I think that the beginning was the most interesting, and then once the shipwreck kind of happened, I sort of lost interest, but I think that it was just written in such an engaging way. There was an info dump, and I learned so much. It was just very easy to read, super engaging, and it also follows Byron, the poet. His grandfather was on that boat, so it follows, he's one of like the main people we focus on. Just an interesting fact. There it is. And I am exactly 60% of the way through A Broken Blade. This was recommended. I think I saw it on Book Talk. I'm gonna hold off on sharing my feelings. I'm reading it. That's all I can give you, because I feel like I'm scarred now by telling you how much I enjoyed or expected to enjoy Silver Under Nightfall, and then I really didn't enjoy it at all. I'm gonna keep my opinions for next month. That was my April. Apologies if this audio is weird. I'm also losing my voice. I haven't done one of these sit down videos in over a month. Thank you for sticking here with me. This was a rough one. Let me know, actually, can you do me a favor and let me know, how does that sound to you? Does this sound noisy? This is with all of my windows open, a fan going. How does this sound? Because I'm currently getting quite toasty in my room, closing myself off from any air. Let me know if that was too noisy in the background for you. But anyway, I'm going to get lunch because I'm starving, and I literally had to pause speaking to let my stomach growl. So I will catch you guys next time. Thank you again so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this. There will be information down below, but you can use the code PETALS, as in flowers, flower petals, to get your first book for $5. Yes, indeed. So thank you so much. As always, love you, Book of the Month. I will catch you guys later, okay? Let me know what you're reading, what I should read next. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that I'm right. Let me know about Tainted Cup and just like what's the tea with these fantasy book talk men and their love of fantasy books written by men. Let me know your thoughts. Catch you later, okay? Thank you always. Welcome to the new home. We're gonna really be trying different backgrounds for the next couple weeks, so bear with me. Love to you always.